Daguerreotype process, or daguerreotypy, was the first publicly announced photographic process, and for nearly 20 years, it was the one most commonly used. It was invented by Louis-Jaques-Mandé Daguerre and introduced worldwide in 1839. By 1860, new processes which were less expensive and produced more easily viewed images had almost completely replaced it. During the past few decades, there has been a small-scale revival of daguerreotypy among photographers interested in making artistic use of early photographic processes. To make a daguerreotype, the daguerreotypist would polish a sheet of silver-plated copper to a mirror finish, treat it with fumes that made its surface light-sensitive, expose it in a camera for as long as was judged to be necessary, which could be as little as a few seconds for brightly sunlit subjects or much longer with less intense lighting, make the resulting latent image on it visible by fuming it with mercury vapor, remove its sensitivity to light by liquid chemical treatment, rinse and dry it, then seal the easily marred result behind glass in a protective enclosure. Viewing a daguerreotype is unlike looking at any other type of photograph. The image does not sit on the surface of the metal, but appears to be floating in space, and the illusion of reality, especially with examples that are sharp and well exposed, is unique to the process. The image is on a mirror-like silver surface, normally kept under glass, and will appear either positive or negative, depending on the angle at which it is viewed, how it is lit and whether a light or dark background is being reflected in the metal. The darkest areas of the image are simply bare silver, lighter areas have a microscopically fine light scattering texture. The surface is very delicate, and even the lightest wiping can permanently scuff it. Some tarnish around the edges is normal, and any treatment to remove it should be done only by a specialized conservator. Several types of antique photographs, most often ambrotypes and tintypes, but sometimes even old prints on paper, are very commonly misidentified as daguerreotypes, especially if they are in the small, ornamented cases in which daguerreotypes made in the US and UK were usually housed. The name daguerreotype correctly refers only to one very specific image type and medium, the product of a process that was in wide use only from the early 1840s to the late 1850s. History: since the Renaissance era, artists and inventors had searched for a mechanical method of capturing visual scenes. Previously, using the camera obscura, artists would manually trace what they saw, or use the optical image in the camera as a basis for solving the problems of perspective and parallax, and deciding color values. The camera obscura's optical reduction of a real scene in three-dimensional space to a flat rendition in two dimensions influenced Western art, so that at one point, it was thought that images based on optical geometry, perspective, belonged to a more advanced civilization. Later, with the advent of modernism, the absence of perspective in Oriental art from China, Japan and in Persian miniatures was revalued. In the early 17th century, the Italian physician and chemist Angelo Sala wrote that powdered silver nitrate was blackened by the sun, but did not find any practical application of the phenomenon. Previous discoveries of photosensitive methods and substances, including silver nitrate by Albertus Magnus in the 13th century, a silver and chalk mixture by Johann Heinrich Schultz in 1724, and Joseph Niepce's bitumen-based heliography in 1822 contributed to development of the daguerreotype. The first reliably documented attempt to capture the image formed in a camera obscura was made by Thomas Wedgwood as early as the 1790s, but according to an 1802 account of his work by Sir Humphry Davy, the images formed by means of a camera obscura have been found too faint to produce, in any moderate time, an effect upon the nitrate of silver. To copy these images was the first object of Mr. Wedgwood in his researches on the subject, and for this purpose he first used the nitrate of silver, which was mentioned to him by a friend, as a substance very sensible to the influence of light, but all his numerous experiments as to their primary end proved unsuccessful. Development in France. In 1829, French artist and chemist Louis-Jaques-Mandé Daguerre, contributing a cutting-edge camera design, partnered with Niepce, a leader in photochemistry, to further develop their technologies. The two men came into contact through their optician, Chevalier, who supplied lenses for their camera obscuras. Niepce's aim originally had been to find a method to reproduce prints and drawings for lithography. He had started out experimenting with light-sensitive materials and had made a contact print from a drawing and then went on to successfully make the first photomechanical record of an image in a camera obscura, the world's first photograph. Niepce's method was to coat a pewter plate with bitumen of Judea, asphalt, and the action of the light differentially hardened the bitumen. The plate was washed with a mixture of oil of lavender and turpentine, leaving a relief image. Niepce called his process heliography, and the exposure for the first successful photograph was 8 hours. Early experiments required hours of exposure in the camera to produce visible results. Modern photohistorians consider the stories of Daguerre discovering mercury development by accident because of a bowl of mercury left in a cupboard, or, alternatively, a broken thermometer to be spurious. However, there is another story of a fortunate accident, related by Louis figure of a silver spoon lying on an iodized silver plate which left its design on the plate by light perfectly. Noticing this, Daguerre wrote to Niepce on May 21, 1831, suggesting the use of iodized silver plates as a means of obtaining light images in the camera. Letters from Niepce to Daguerre dated 24 June and November 8, 1831, show that Niepce was unsuccessful in obtaining satisfactory results following Daguerre's suggestion, although he had produced a negative on an iodized silver plate in the camera. Niepce's letters to Daguerre dated 29 January and March 3, 1832 show that the use of iodized silver plates was due to Daguerre and not Niepce. Jean-Baptiste Dumas, who was president of the National Society for the Encouragement of Science and a chemist, put his laboratory at Daguerre's disposal. According to Austrian chemist Joseph Maria Eder, Daguerre was not versed in chemistry, and it was Dumas who suggested Daguerre use sodium hyposulfite, discovered by Herschel in 1819, as a fixer to dissolve the unexposed silver salts. First mention in print, 1835, and public announcement, 1839. At the end of a review of one of Daguerre's diorama spectacles in the journal Des Artistes on September 27, 1835. A diorama painting of a landslide that occurred in La Vallée de Gaulle. A paragraph tacked on to the end of the review made passing mention of rumor that was going around the Paris studios of Daguerre's attempts to make a visual record on metal plates of the fleeting image produced by the camera obscura. It is said that Daguerre has found the means to collect, on a plate prepared by him, the image produced by the camera obscura, in such a way that a portrait, a landscape, or any view, projected upon this plate by the ordinary camera obscura, leaves an imprint in light and shade there, and thus presents the most perfect of all drawings. A preparation put over this image preserves it for an indefinite time. The physical sciences have perhaps never presented a marvel comparable to this one. A further clue to fixing the date of invention of the process is that when the Paris correspondent of the London periodical The Athenaeum reported the public announcement of the daguerreotype in 1839, He mentioned that the daguerreotypes now being produced were considerably better than the ones he had seen 4 years earlier. François Arago announced the daguerreotype process at a joint meeting of the French Academy of Sciences and the Académie des Beaux-Arts on January 9, 1839. Daguerre was present, but complained of a sore throat. Later that year William Fox Talbot announced his silver chloride sensitive paper process. Together, these announcements caused commentators to choose the 1839 as the year photography was born, or made public, although of course Daguerre had been producing daguerreotypes since 1835 and kept the process secret. Daguerre and Niepce had together signed an agreement in which remuneration for the invention would be paid for by subscription. However, the campaign they launched to finance the invention failed. François Arago, whose views on the system of patenting inventions can be gathered from speeches he made later in the House of Deputies, he apparently thought the English patent system had advantages over the French one, did not think the idea of raising money by subscription to be a good one, and supported Daguerre by arranging for motions to be passed in both houses of the French Parliament. Daguerre did not patent and profit from his invention in the usual way. Instead, it was arranged that the French government would acquire the rights in exchange for a lifetime pension. The government would then present the daguerreotype process free to the world as a gift, which it did on August 19, 1839. However, 5 days previously to this, Miles Berry, a patent agent acting on Daguerre's behalf, filed for patent number 8194 of 1839, a new or improved method of obtaining the spontaneous reproduction of all the images received in the focus of the camera obscura. The patent applied to England, Wales, and the town of Berwick-upon-Tweed, and in all Her Majesty's colonies and plantations abroad. This was the usual wording of English patent specifications before 1852. It was only after the 1852 Act, which unified the patent systems of England, Ireland and Scotland, that a single patent protection was automatically extended to the whole of the British Isles, including the Channel Isles and the Isle of Man. Richard Beard bought the patent rights from Miles Berry, and also obtained a Scottish patent, which he apparently did not enforce. The United Kingdom and the colonies and plantations abroad therefore became the only places where a license was legally required to make and sell daguerreotypes. Much of Daguerre's early work was destroyed when his home and studio caught fire on March 8, 1839, while the painter Samuel Morse was visiting from the U.S. Malcolm Daniel points out that fewer than 25 securely attributed photographs by Daguerre survive, a mere handful of still lifes, Parisian views, and portraits from the dawn of photography.